Well, welcome back everybody, and today we're starting a new chapter which deals with field work. Now, field work really, when we talk about field work, we're talking about people going out to interview, so they're interacting with the public, and that could be door-to-door, face-to-face type environment. It could be email or telephone. So field work is very important. What we're going to be covering today is not very profound. Most of this stuff is common sense, but it's things that you need to know if you're going to be able to gather data from the environment. So let's go ahead and begin today with field work. Okay, welcome back everybody, and today we're going to be in chapter 18, which deals with field work. Now, what is field work? Well, field work deals with going out into the environment and collecting data. Primarily what you are is an interviewer, and you're going, instead of calling, which field work can include calling, but you're going out and you are engaging the public, mostly face to face, but again, you can do mail, you can do email, you can do phones, and so forth to gather data. And to give you an example of a field worker, I don't know if they are as popular today as they used to be, but invariably, whenever I would go to the mall, at the entrance or near the entrance to all of the doors to the mall, access to the mall, there would be people there with clipboards, and they would stop you and ask you, "Sir, do you have a minute to take a brief survey, or can I ask you a few questions?" And normally we would just, as politely as we could, tell them, "No, I just don't have the time right now," and you would go on about your business. Now, a field worker needs to be able to handle rejection because they get a lot of it. A lot of people, especially when you are in a public place trying to do business or go about your business, the last thing in the world you want to do is take time out as a distraction from your routine to answer questions and so forth. It's an irritation for a lot of people. So the nature of field work is trying to collect data by going out and engaging the public. Now, field work is necessary. How are you going to know the answers to the questions that your business may have if you don't engage the public? Now, this is the importance of field work. Even though it may be a nuisance or an irritant, it is necessary. So field work is something that is a distraction considered a distraction by a lot of people, but companies do need it, and they are still out there engaging the public to get the information that companies are needing. Now, the technology, I guess, has evolved when it comes to field work, and your little highlight there is Askia. And here, instead of using notebooks and clipboards, they're using iPads and PCs and PDAs and all of that, using technology now to be able to gather information and so forth. So this is just the way that field work has evolved to the point where you can ask the survey, or you can collect data or statistics or whatever, and not have to worry about just collecting it there by clipboard and a pen or a pencil. The PDA and the iPads and tablets and all of that stuff can do that for you. But this is just a way that field work has evolved in their technology to be able to, I guess, streamline and be more efficient in what they do. Now again, the nature of field work, you have the field worker. Now this is an individual who's responsible for gathering data in the field, and their typical activities would include administering a questionnaire door to door. I don't see a lot of those. I have seen a few and I have seen some people coming out and doing a interest study. Would you subscribe to cable if they put it out in your area, or cell phone coverage, or whatever? It may be a salesman doing pre-sales, but that's really the only door-to-door interaction that I've had. You might have had some different kinds, but they do go from door to door. You have telephone interviews, which they'll call from a central location. You have counting pedestrians in a shopping mall, and they not only count, they will come up to you, and supervising the collection of data. So this is kind of what a field worker will do, what they're into, their responsibilities and so forth. And again, this is something where you have to be a people person, and you have to be able to handle objections and so forth. Now, I was trained to do that when I was in the military, recruiting for the military. Of course, mine was sales, mine wasn't research, but a lot of the techniques were similar, and I'll share some of those with you here as we go along. But it's enough to say that in the course of the day, you're going to be dealing with a lot of people, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's on the telephone, whatever it may be. You're going to be interacting extensively with individuals. Now, who conducts the field work? Well, you have field interviewing services, and that's a research supplier that specializes in gathering data. Your textbook mentions several companies, especially in your highlights, and they will, for a fee, they will do the research for you. And many companies today, instead of trying to train and retain just specialists to do research, they will use these people to do that. They'll go out, they know how to do it, they know the questions to ask, they know the techniques to get people to respond. So they're very good at what they do, but they can be very expensive. An in-house interviewer is a field worker who is employed by the company conducting the research. So this is someone who is in the company, who has been trained to do all of this, and they're at your disposal. The benefit is that you don't charge, or they don't charge for their service because they work for you. But the downside to it is that you have to train them. And if they're not trained, you're not sure of the quality of interaction that you're going to have with the individuals that they interact with. So those are the pros and cons of an in-house interviewer. Again, the key to it is they're at your disposal, and you don't have to pay them over and over again unless they go to another company, and then you've got to train someone else to do the job. So both have their advantages and disadvantages. The job requirements for interviewers, and some of this stuff is so fundamental, it's funny, but you need to be healthy. And why do they say that? Because you may be walking a whole lot. You'll be on your feet a lot. So if you're doing that type of field work, you may have to go out into rural areas where you may have to go long distances just walking from house to house and so forth. So you need to have a relative amount of health and have good shoes. Outgoing, an introvert probably wouldn't do that well in this type of field. So you need to be outgoing. You need to enjoy talking to people, engaging people, pleasing appearance, well-groomed and tailored. You need to be a professional or look professional. If I came up to you, or you came up to me and you're in dirty jeans and t-shirt, I'm not going to give you the time of day. In fact, I'm just probably just ignore you and keep walking. So you need to look the part. Now, the company that trains you should tell you how to dress. I mean, if you're doing a survey of skateboarding youth, and you want to see their habits on a daily basis, yeah, blue jeans or shorts or whatever would apply. But you do need to match the audience or the participants that you'll be dealing with. So a pleasing appearance, well groomed and tailored. Now normally in the training portion of this, you'll have a briefing session where you just get the overview. This is who we are, this is what we're about, kind of like an orientation in a company where you're working. When you're brand new, they'll give you the pep talk and this is who we are, this is what we're about, and these are some of the things that you need to know about us. So it's a get to know you type of thing. The training objective is to ensure that the data collection instrument will be administered in a uniform fashion by all field workers. So if it's a laptop, if it's a PDA, if it's a clipboard, they're going to show you how to use that in order to accumulate the information that you're needing. Other training topics can include how to make initial contact with the respondent and secure the interview, how to ask survey questions, how to probe, how to record responses, how to terminate the interview. Now, when I was in school to learn all of these things, and again, mine covered sales. I really didn't get involved with research, but we had to know the same techniques that these individuals had to know, because the main thing when you're dealing with people is that you have to realize you have a finite amount of time to deal with them and a very small window of opportunity in which to deal with them. So knowing how to get there, get your foot in the door, how to, so to speak, how to capture their attention without them turning you off. In the first few seconds, you're either going to win them or lose them. And it's a very unforgiving type of environment that you're in. They don't usually give you second chances. So you have to know what you're doing to get in there, get your foot in the door, whether it's through the door-to-door, whether it's on the phone or whatever. You need to be able to capture their attention and to get to the interview itself, or the questions and so forth. So all of those things take time. I was in a recruiting school for a month, and for that whole month, that's all we did was learn how to do these things. And then after that, we had follow-up training constantly when I was back at my recruiting station. So we emphasized training over and over again. Now, if you're going to work for a company, you may not have that luxury of having an extensive training program or being able to have follow-up training through mentors and things like that. So these things will be necessary, but you may not have them at your disposal. So the more you learn, if you get into this type of research, the more you learn through formal training, through books, through webinars and so forth, I would suggest you soak it all up. You can never get too much training when it comes to this type of research, because again, people are different. You need to be able to pick up on cues from people, engage them quickly, and get to the meat of the meeting. So those are just some topics, but are some hints and things for you. But these are the training topics that you will normally learn while you're in that type of training setting. Now, making initial contact, personal interviews. And here they talk about making opening remarks that will convince the respondent that his or her cooperation is important. One of the things that they talk about is to let the person know that you are there, and in the interview with the telephone as well. Let them know that you're not there to sell them anything, but that you are there to do research, and that the research will benefit the greater public, so they feel like they're doing a service for the people. Now that will help pave the way. Now, one of the things that I've noticed that is going to hurt, especially telephone interviews, is I've had some people call and they would pass themselves off as researchers. Mr. Marshall, I understand you're a veteran, which I am, and this is how it would go. Mr. Marshall, I understand you're a veteran. Now, when did you serve? And we're just asking for some general questions, and what type of discharge did you receive, and this, that, and the other. And then they would ask, well, we've noticed that your mortgage insurance is relatively high, and would you be interested, or would you consider our offer of cheaper insurance and whatever? So, and at that point, I shut them down. If you cannot come up and be open and honest at the very beginning, then I don't want to deal with you, because if you're shady in that area, there's no telling how shady you're going to be in the rest of it. So, and for people who are trying to do actual research on the telephone, that may hurt them, because the person might have, like me, been exposed to things like that and people like that, and they won't give you the time of day. But anyway, personal interviews. You need to convince the respondent that his or her cooperation is important. Rapport is very important. And one of the things that when I would go and interview people, I would not know them, I wouldn't know anything, but I would walk into, if they allowed me into their house, which they did, I mean, it's an interview, you may not have that option, but I would take a look around at the way that the house looked. I would look at pictures on the wall. I would look at things that they would put up on the bookcases or on the television or whatever, just to give me an idea of what type of person, what interests this person has, and so on and so forth. For instance, I would walk into a house and I would see maybe some trophies. Oh, I see you played football. Were these your trophies or so? Because you don't want to assume anything. Yeah, they were my trophies. Oh, what position did you play? And I would immediately get the person talking. And that was to be able to build, first of all, rapport and put them at ease. Because whether it's an interview or whatever, they're going to be on guard because, they're going to try to sell me something or whatever. So I wouldn't even talk about what I was there for until after I had built a rapport where I thought the person was going to talk and respond favorably. So that's personal interviews. Now, telephone interviews is more challenging, and I've had to do those. Now, here they say give the interviewer's name, and that personalizes the call. Provide the name of the research agency so that they know that you are trustworthy. But again, if it's a slick salesman, they'll give you the name of a company that looks professional or sounds professional, but it's really a sales company. But providing an accurate estimate of the time helps gain cooperation. Mr. Smith, I need 5 minutes of your time or 2 minutes. And of course, if you ask them, can I have 30 minutes? They're going to click it on you. They're going to hang up. So make sure that you give them the time so that they will know about what to expect, but don't go overboard with the time. It may be that you might need to ask them if you can follow up later on with subsequent questions than to hit them all at once with a big amount of time of talking. Now, whenever I would call, I would say, is this John Smith? John, my name is Petty Officer Marshall. I'm with the Navy Reserve, and I understand you are graduating high school this year. Is this correct? Oh, well, how's high school been, and this, that, and the other. And I would try to build up some rapport with them. And then they talk to you also if they don't have time to talk to you right now. Oh, well, John, let me ask you this. I'm going to be available between 4 and 5 or 7 and 8 tomorrow afternoon or tomorrow evening. Which time would be best for you? Now, if you notice, I'm not asking them, well, John, do you mind if I try calling you back later on? I'm not giving them that choice. The only choice I'm giving them is when they would prefer for me to call them back. So just little techniques like that, you will learn if you go to that type of training. You'll learn how to do those things. But that's personal, telephone, and then internet surveys. The respondent may receive an email requesting assistance. So you would listen, we need you to help us with this research and give a brief overview of it. Now, internet you have no control over. Telephone and personal interviews, you do have some control in as much as that you are talking to the person, and if you are adept at doing these things, you can control the conversation and the tempo and the follow-up to a certain degree. In internet, you just need to make it as attention-grabbing as you can. We need your assistance with this. This research will go for this, and this, and follow up as quickly as you can before they forget the whole thing and forget that they even read anything from you. So those are some of the principles or suggestions that the textbook talks about. Again, this is not even scratching the surface. There's so much to each one of these things that you can learn and need to learn if you're going to be doing this type of research. But again, you would need to follow up with an institute or a training academy that provides that. Now, interviewing for Horizon Research Services. This is a company that does research. They're stationed out of, or they're out of Columbia, Missouri, and they've been helping hospitals and municipalities there in that local region. But it does serve, I mean, it's not very big, but it does serve a purpose, an important purpose, and the people there. So if you see here, sometimes recruiting 12 participants for a focus group, and that's some things that they try to do is create focus groups for companies. Takes about 3 hours and up to 600 phone calls. Now, that depends on how adept or how skillful you are on the phone. Now, we used to do that in recruiting, and what we did is we had a formula. For every person that we recruited into the Navy, it would take so many phone calls, initial phone calls, to get so many interviews, to get so many people to go down and get a physical and pass the police test and all of that, to get so many people out of that to agree to sit down and look at the jobs, and then to get the actual job and enlist. Now, a good recruiter, I could do it, and let's say I had a quota of 3 a month, and that was the average. It may take me 20 phone calls a month to get 3 people into the Navy Reserve. Now, depending on how much you know about sales and interview techniques and telephone techniques, that may be large or small, but it'd take me maybe 20. But when I was on the phone, not only did I create interest, but I qualified them on the phone. I knew that if this person, based on the tone of the conversation and the interview and all of that, that this person would go in. I could determine that to a large extent on the phone, just through experience and talking to the person. Inexperienced, and I have seen some recruiters who would have to call 100 different people to get 3 people in, because they didn't know first of all, how to build rapport enough to get an interview. But when they were being screened on the phone, they didn't know how to screen them well, or to be able to pick up on the nuances that were going to be necessary to determine if they were even going to be interested enough in even talking to you. So that's the same thing with Horizon. 600 phone calls to get 12 participants. That's purely numbers driven, it's volume, and that's really what we did. The more people you call, the more chances you have of getting a person into the Navy. And that's really the name of the game. The key to it is being effective enough so that you can decrease the amount of calls for the same amount of return. And that takes skill and practice and so forth. So these are some, as we go into field work, these are some of the things that we'll talk about and maybe enlighten you a little bit more on it. You may think that this may be something you'd like to do. If you like people, then it would be a good job. Now, as far as pay, I'm not sure how well the pay is. I'm sure you're not going to make a whole lot unless you go into business for yourself. But it is a job that lets you engage people, get out of the office, and to be able to go out and do competent business research. Today, as we saw, field work is a necessary element in research. It is going out and talking to the actual people who are the consumers. But there are some fundamentals that you need to know, and we're going to go through this week looking at some of those fundamentals. But today, we're off to a good start as we took a look at the foundations of field work, and tomorrow we'll carry on a little bit further. But until then, you have a good day, and we'll continue tomorrow.